Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. It is a beautiful day. Let's go here. All right. So today we're going to be discussing pricing and appraisals. Today we're going to talk about appraisal standards, kind of what to look for. We're going to go through some pricing strategies, just kind of talk through that. I've got a few appraisals that we can look at just so you can see and discuss what some of the qualities mean, like the C ratings, Q ratings, what some of the bedroom and bathroom counts get, just so we can kind of just go over and get a general idea of what that appraisal looks like. So we're going to go through some of those things today. And let's go ahead and just jump in and start talking about pricing. So right now, pricing is a really important factor. You know, what we're really looking for, our job is to try to put as much money in the seller's pocket as possible. That's what our job is. Our job is also to tell the seller the truth about what's going on. So when I say here, we're trying to find two numbers when pricing, we're trying to find what it's going to sell for and also what it could appraise for too. We have to understand that those can be two different numbers, and we see that a lot. How many times have you had a seller come to you and say, I want to sell my property. I already have an appraisal and it shows this number. And then we go do our pricing and our pricing doesn't justify the appraisal. The appraisal goes back 6 months. But the most recent sales in the last 90 days don't support that appraisal. A buyer wasn't willing to pay what the appraiser appraised it for. So just because an appraiser says that it's worth X, that doesn't mean that that's what the buyer is willing to pay. It just means that his opinion of the value of the property is X. But what if the market has shifted in the last 3 months and the buyers aren't willing to pay that number for it? We get that a lot. We also get where we see a value of X and we put it up on the market at a certain number. And over 3 months of being on the market, we lose some of our comps. And we lose a few of those comparables that may keep us at a higher price. So you're constantly having to update those comparables. I say right now, doing quick checks weekly to see what sold comps we may have lost and what sold comps we may gain along with pendings. Giving that to a seller in a weekly update. Because we can price it at a certain number, 3 months later it hasn't sold, and all of the comparables that showed us that higher amount have now fallen off the market outside of the 6-month range because we've been on market 3 months. And now the most recent sales show that we should be at a lower amount. And it works the same way with a seller who gets an appraisal. I got an appraisal last month, 2 months ago, and this is the number. Okay, well, he goes on the market 2 months later, which is now 4 months, and now we're in the winter. Now we're in a different time of year. Homes may not be selling quite the same. You may not get that number. So we have to understand that usually we're trying to figure out what those two numbers could be. What is the property going to sell for? And what could it potentially appraise for? Once we go through and figure out what the valuation could be, is that justified by an appraiser? Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Is that number something that can be justified by an appraisal? And we'll talk about what some of those standards are from an appraisal perspective and how you approach pricing to make sure that we stay within that guideline. So the main focus that we need to have is it's not always the appraised value, it's really what is the buyer willing to pay? What is that buyer willing to pay the day they decide to buy? And they're going to make a decision based on what else is available in the market for them to choose from. And once they see what's available in the market for them to choose from, find the one that works for them, their agent, if they're a good agent, is going to go and say, is that price justifiable by the sold comps? Are you making a good decision buying that home? So that's why there's always those two little pieces. But our main focus is, what is a buyer willing to pay for this property? And again, sometimes it's not always going to match what that seller's appraisal is. I'm always a little concerned when I have a seller who has an appraisal. Because let's look at it this way. If I go into, if I go into a property and the appraiser comes in, there's no contract, We don't have a specific price that we have to hit. We don't have a specific number. There is no lender. There is nothing. He's just able to go a little more free with his perspective on everything because there are no confines of a contract and a number. And he starts doing the numbers like, yeah, here's the number based on what I see. I just feel like it can be a little looser because there is no specificity for him to have to hit a specific number, have to be held to a certain standard for that contract or for a loan. I'm not saying they do it intentionally. It's just what happens. If I was going to go run a mile and I said, I'm just going to go run a mile, I'll just run a mile. But if I said I'm going to go run a mile in 7 minutes, there's a different perspective and intention. So I know there's a different focus. So you can get a different outcome depending on what that focus is. That's just what I tend to see. We tend to see those appraisals don't always justify what the buyer will pay for on the open market. All right. So let's talk about, like, when you start doing pricing, your perfect world scenario when you're doing pricing for a property is to find the exact same spitting image home of what you have. If you have a 2,000 square foot D.R. Horton built home and it's nicely updated with a pond view and no backyard neighbors, the perfect appraisal comp, perfect pricing comp is going to be the exact same floor plan, 2,000 square foot on a pond view with everything exactly the same. But the reality of it is that doesn't typically happen. So when you're starting and looking for this, we have to say, okay, what are the parameters that we're going to use? What is an appraiser going to do when he has this? So what an appraiser has is they're going to try their best to stay within 1 mile of the subject property. They try their best. But what does that mean that they're going to stay within that mile? That doesn't mean that they're going to go up to 1 mile for comps. They're going to look as close as they can to this property, as close as they possibly can, in the same neighborhood when possible. So if you have the same comparable properties, 3 or 4 solds on your same street or in the same neighborhood that's within a 1/4 mile, he's going to use those rather than going outside the neighborhood into a different neighborhood that's 3/4 of a mile away, closer to a mile away, just because those are higher priced. So you have to be careful if we start jumping outside the neighborhood because, hey, the next door neighbors, the neighborhood next door is selling for a higher price, and we're more like those homes because we're a little more updated, a little different, it's got a better view, it's got better this, that, and the other. If you have comps in your neighborhood that are more like yours and they're priced like X, you're going to have to use those comps. You can try to stretch it by going to the next neighborhood over that's 3/4 a mile away. You just better have a really good argument for that appraiser as to why you did that, which we'll get to another point is you should meet every appraiser so that you can justify your value. So they're going to always try to stay within 1 mile, within the same neighborhood when all possible. Try to go as close as possible because the further you get outside of that neighborhood, the more possibility there is for a change. You can go over here and you can go right across 41 and have a completely different product. You can go across 75, over 301, over in a lot of our other areas. You will go across one of the main roads. It's within a 1/4 mile, but it's a completely different product, even though it's built around the same age. So they're always going to try to stay within that neighborhood, go up to 1 mile if they can, and then try to avoid going over any major boundaries. So what are those major boundaries they try to avoid going over? They're going to stay within the same city. They're not going to go from, I'm using examples here, Riverview to Apollo Beach or Riverview to Ruskin. They're going to stay within Riverview because taxes could be different, schools are going to be different, desirability is going to be different. All of those will have an impact on that. They're not going to go over major barriers like if you're in the Tampa area, if you're on one side of 275, they're going to try not to go to the other side of 275 because that can be a significant difference. Any of those factors, they have to have a justification for going over and outside of what their normal parameters are. And as long as they have justification, they can do it, and they have to be able to write it up in their report. So they'll try to stay in the same neighborhood, similar, comparable neighborhood. If comps are there, they're always going to use the ones that are closer. You can't ignore the comps that are right next to you inside your neighborhood just because you don't like them and they don't get the number where you want it, or because the seller wants more. You can't ignore them. I'm not saying you can't try to push outside comparables, but you can't ignore the ones that are there. You better have good justification for why you used comparables in a different neighborhood than the ones that are right next door, right there. They're also, once they kind of get that down with the distance, they're also going to look at the mortgage companies. Yeah, okay. So they're also going to look at square footage. So what is a range that you would use if you were using a 2,000 square foot home? What square foot range would you use? The max that they're going to want to go is plus or minus 20%, like the max they want to go. They can go more, but the higher they go in the difference of 20% or more, all of a sudden now they have to have special reasoning and justification for doing that. So they're going to try to stay within plus or minus 20%. So a 2,000 square foot home, 20% is 400 square feet. That means 1,600 to 2,400 square foot. That's a really big range. So generally what you'll see is plus or minus 200 to 300 square foot. Usually on like our average size homes, 2,000 square foot, 2,200 square foot, you'll see plus or minus 200 to 300 square foot. But the max is typically they want to stay within 20%. If you go more than that, they need real justification. Because what happens is if you're greater than that, if you're say a 2,000 square foot home and you're using a 2,700 square foot home, they're accounting for a major adjustment to that property of 700 square foot, which could be $35,000 to $70,000, and that's a huge adjustment that they have to be able to justify, and it skews numbers. So they try to stay within those parameters. They're going to try to stay within similar age unless there's specific justification for it. They're not going to compare your 1950s home to a 2000 home right around the corner. The only way they can do that is if your 1950s home has been gutted completely and electric, plumbing, floors, roof, structure, everything, kitchens, baths, everything has been done. And now this home, effective year built, now becomes a 2010 plus because of everything being done to it. That's the only way that they'll use something like that. And even then, they prefer to use 1950s homes, 1940s, 50s, 60s to 1940s, 50s, 60s, 2000 plus to 2000 plus. They also will consider and say, well, when have recent building codes changed? So if they know that there is a major building code change after a certain date, or flood insurance rate map change after a certain date, they will try to use that in their parameters as well. We try to stay, if this is a building code that was put in 1980, they're going to try to use anything below 1980, 1960s, 70s. If it's anything, if it's a 1980s home, they'll try to use homes that are in the 1980s. So again, similar age. You can't just go and use a new home compared to an old home. They're going to also use similar condition and similar status of a remodel. They have some justification to go one way or the other for condition or quality. I'll show you what those ratings are. And they have some a little bit of variable to go when they don't have perfect comps for a home that's been updated or completely not updated. So if your home is updated and nothing else that you can find comparable is, they have ratings to help with that. And if your home is not updated and everything else was updated, they have ratings for that to adjust. But they would prefer if they can find non-updated homes to non-updated or similar condition of updates. They're trying to stay within a parameter. Again, their job is to find the perfect spitting image. And then they use their discretion for how far off of that spitting image they go. And they typically will go in specific order in weight. They weigh homes that are, and this is just my opinion. They have their own way of doing it. Closer has more weight, closer in condition has more weight than closer in proximity. age has more weight than something else. They sit there and they use their discretion for which ones they weigh more to give better credit to. When we're doing comparables as well in pricing, if you have a pool home, do everything you can to use a pool home and compare it to a pool home. Do everything you can to use that. If you do not, if you have to use a non-pool home and compare it to a pool home, you're going to leave money on the table. How much does it cost to put in a pool right now? What are some of the quotes that you are hearing for someone putting in a pool right now? Somebody throw some. I know everybody's got one. What are you hearing some people talk about for valuations for a pool? 100K minimum. I just had somebody get a quote for about 80. You're not going to pay less than about 70K for a pool, but I just had somebody get a quote for 100K for a simple, basic, small, rectangular pool with a screen and pavers. Sun shelf, fountain, all the stuff they include. You're probably not getting away for less than 70 grand. It's going to be 70, 80 grand, probably 80 to 100 more than likely. So if a pool is going to cost 80 grand, how much does an appraiser give you for a pool? Anybody have any recent appraisals where they saw what the valuation they gave for a pool is when he was considering a home that did not have a pool, giving value for it? Anybody see that? Tell me what one of your recent ones is. How much they gave for the value of a pool. So somebody chat in. What did you see they gave for the value of a pool on a non-pool home if they were comparing them? 32, but it was an older pool. 30 grand is what they gave for a pool. More than likely that pool had a screened enclosure, and that pool was older, but it's still 30K. Right now, you're probably, if you see a pool home, if it has a screen enclosure, you're probably going to get around 30K for that pool from an appraiser. If it's a brand new pool with all these bells and whistles, you might get a little bit more. You might get 40 or 40, 45. But most of the time, what we're seeing from appraisals are about 30K for a pool. So if you compare a non-pool home to a pool home, and I have a pool home and I use that non-pool home, a buyer in that market, I'm seeing in a lot of our markets, a buyer is willing to pay 50 to 100,000 more for a pool home than a non-pool home. Is anybody else seeing that? Is anybody else seeing most of our pool homes for the same style and type of home, they're spending 50 to a minimum 50 grand to $100,000 more when it's a pool home? Is anybody else seeing that? And we'll talk about what the challenge would be. Yeah. 50 to 100K more for a pool home, just so they don't have to go spend the 50 to 100K on a pool. And if we're seeing buyers willing to pay, let's make it an even 75, 80K for a pool home more than a non-pool home, and we use a non-pool home to compare in value, and the appraiser only gives 30K for a pool, probably 40 max, our home is going to come out 40,000 less. So my opinion, and these appraisals and pricing are all opinions, my opinion is I will go find a pool home within 1 mile rather than a non-pool home in the same neighborhood, and I will fight for that with the appraiser. I will go to the appraiser and say, Mr. Appraiser, look, here's a pool home that sold within 1 mile of this home. Here's the exact same home without a pool that sold, and the difference is $100,000. Here's another one in a different neighborhood within a mile. Pool home, non-pool home. The difference was $90,000. Here's our neighborhood. I know we only have one comparable pool home. Here's the pool home that sold. Here's the non-pool home exactly like it. The difference is $100,000. I know you're probably only going to give 30 or 40 grand for a pool home. That means that this seller is leaving 60 to 70 grand on the table, which is why I'm only comparing to pool homes within 1 mile, and I don't think that the same home in this neighborhood without a pool is the best comparison. Look at what the buyers are saying they're willing to pay for pool homes, 80 to 100 grand more. So I'm fighting for the value of using a pool home that's outside the neighborhood, and only pool homes rather than the ones inside the neighborhood that don't have a pool where they add value. So I'm trying to see what I can push and get away with the appraiser. So yes, I'm seeing that, but why are appraisers not giving more value then? That's not, if I knew that, I'd have tons of money and I'd be able to influence them a little bit more. That's just what they're doing. I mean, they were giving about 50%. So for me, like in 2019, when I put a pool in the house that I had then, cost about 45 grand. They were only giving 20 or 25 for pools. Now they're come up a little bit, 25, 30, sometimes for a newer one, 30 to 40 max, which is about 50% of some of these pools. And it just hasn't fully caught up. So the best thing for us to do is always use pool homes compared to pool homes. It's always best to compare 1 story to 1 story and 2 story to 2 story. 1 story homes typically sell for a higher price per square foot. Typically. Not always, but typically. Why is that? Well, if you have 2 2,500 square foot homes, one of them is 1 story, one of them is 2 story. The 1 story 2,500 square foot home is going to require a larger lot first. You go to that 2 story 2,500 square foot home, you can put 1,250 square foot on the bottom, 1,250 square foot on top. Now you can use a 40 or 50 foot lot as opposed to a 60 foot lot. So now you have a larger lot, which is going to cost more. Is construction cost something that is a factor? Yeah, what's the top story of most 2-story homes? What's the second story made of? Wood. Is wood more expensive than the block and the slab and everything else? Typically, no, the wood is less expensive. So for a 1-story home, you have 2,500 square foot of slab that's poured, 2,500 square foot of exterior block that's put on, and more roofing material. Now you take a 2,500 square foot 2-story home, you only have 1,300 square foot of slab, 1,300 square foot of block, and half the roofing material. So there's a lot of things that typically dictate that a 2-story home typically sells at a lower price per square foot. Typically, not always. And that's why you see in a lot of areas where there's a lot of building going on, what do you see everywhere? 2-story homes. They can maximize their value. In areas like ours, they see that, okay, I can put this many 2-story homes in, give everybody what they want, which is 4 and 5 bedrooms, if that's what they're looking for, and I can get more of them on 40 and 50 foot lots rather than doing 60 foot lots. And because the market is still very good in this area, I can charge more for it and still not be at the price of what they would pay for a 1-story home. It's all economics, and they're charging more for them. The other thing is the 1-story homes typically have a higher price per square foot because, curious what the reason is for the pricing increase on putting a pool. Yeah, I wish I knew that. I would say it's material and demands. That's just what I'm saying. They're finding every reason for to increase everything with inflation. Square foot is a better comparison than bedrooms. Like a lot of times they're talking, yeah, but that's not a 5 bedroom. Mine's a 5 bedroom. That one's 4 bedrooms. It's the same square foot. Now there might be a different factor where that buyer wants that 5th bedroom, but if we have 3,000 square foot homes, the same amount of money went into building this 3,000 square foot home as did this one. You might get a little bit of value for the extra bedroom, but I would beg to say that you're going to get more value out of the square footage in comparing square footage than you would than trying to get value for the bedroom. They'll typically maybe give you $5,000 to $8,000 for a room, but let's just focus on square foot first. Look, half the properties we see that are like 5 bedroom, it's 4 bedrooms with a flex room or office type thing. And then the other ones that are 4 bedrooms, I say 4 bedrooms, have the same flex or office space, but it's not labeled as a bedroom. So it's the same square footage, same size, buyer made the same decision, paid the same amount, and the pricing comes out to be the same. And the number of rooms comes out to be the same when you start factoring in all of those factors. Okay, so try to stick with the square footage. Yeah, the two-story homes typically in most of our regions, you're going to see two-story homes typically sell for a little less. You can use one-story homes compared to two-story. Just know it may not be a direct factor and a direct comparable, and it might, if you have a one-story comp, it might pull your pricing down a little bit because they can spread that price over more square footage, less cost spread over more square footage keeps that price down. And there's a lot of fixed costs that go into building. And if you have a 2,500 square foot home, it's more square footage to spread the fixed costs out. If you have a 1,500 square foot home, it's less square footage to spread those fixed costs out. So the smaller homes typically sell for a higher price per square foot. Right? That's why we want to try to compare size to size, condition to condition, and things like that. Let's move over to different things that appraisers see for valuations. These are some of the things that we're seeing. Third car garage, third driveway space, 5 to 10 grand. So if you have a 2-car garage and a 3-car garage home, the third car garage, if it's a tandem garage, maybe not the same amount, but if it's the actual extended out third car garage and a driveway, a lot of times you can expect about $5,000 to $10,000 for that third garage. Half baths are usually about $1,500 to $3,000, usually. Now, these are all based on different factors. So if you're in an area where all you're selling is $1 million homes, it's going to be different. This is for the primary factors of $300,000 to $600,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 homes that are your normal homes that you see in most of our markets. These are those factors. Obviously, you get into different neighborhoods, these numbers change a little bit when they go back and forth. But full bathroom is usually $4,000 to $6,000, sometimes up to $8,000, depending on how big it is. But usually a full bath will get you about $5,000. Half bath will get you about $1,500, $2,500. Pools, $15,000 to $45,000. Usually pool with no screen, about $20,000. Pool with a screen, $25,000 to $30,000. Pool spa screen, $30,000, $35,000. Pool spa screen, outdoor kitchen. We can get these numbers will push up a little bit compared to when I did this last time. Pond views, $5,000 to $20,000. It just depends. What they do is they go into every neighborhood and then they see what a home with a pond view sold for and they compare it to a home without a pond view and they see what the difference in pricing was. And then they attribute that pricing difference to their comparables they're doing for your sale. So just because a buyer bought a home in new construction and paid a $30,000 lot premium because it was on a water view or a pond view or retention view, that's not going to always factor over into the resale. Well, I paid $30,000 for this lot. I'm sorry. You're probably not going to get that back. We're probably going to have about $5,000 to $15,000 for that view, just depending. Look at the other homes in the neighborhood. The ones with the view sold for about $10,000 more. It's about what we're going to equate to it. Square footage, depending on the area, you cannot just take the price per square foot of a home and attribute that to the difference in square footage for an appraisal. Now I'll show you appraisal. We're almost out of time. So we can jump in and show you some of that. You can't just attribute price per square foot. It's a $250 price per square foot. Mine is $200 price per square foot. Mine is $200 bigger, so I get $40,000 more. Doesn't work that way. The appraiser is going to find out from the sales what that difference in number value is. He's going to say, hey, 300 square foot larger sold for $30,000 more. So 300 square foot equates to $100 a square foot in this neighborhood. If it's $100 a square foot in this neighborhood and you're 200 square foot larger, you're $20,000 better. You just took the $200 price per square foot that everything's selling for and tried to multiply it by my 200 square foot larger and got $40,000. Doesn't work that way. He calculates what the difference in square footage is and what the difference in price was and calculates a price per square foot for the difference. And that's what he will attribute to the difference in the size-wise between your home and the other ones. And then lot size is just dependent on that. Appraisal categories. These are things that are on your appraisals. Concessions. If it's customary that concessions are included in sales, they may or may not take it off the price. If it's not customary and nobody's getting concessions, but your sale got a concession, they may reduce that from the price. I have seen where a home had a $10,000 concession. The appraiser reduced it off of the comparable price. He said, hey, I know that one sold for $400 and you're under contract for $400, but that one gave a $10,000 concession. I'm reducing the value by $10,000 to $390. Date of sale, if he has to go outside of 6 months, they're going to figure out if that was a rising or declining market, and they're going to add or subtract value because of the length of time in between the sales. Size, the site and lot size. Construction quality. Construction quality comes in a Q rating, and the Q rating is done at this standard. Q1 is excellent quality rating. Q2 is very good. Q3 is good quality. Q4 or 5 is average, and Q6 is fair to poor. So Q1, excellent. This means that it's basically a brand new home. Quality is absolutely brand new, doesn't need anything. Very good quality. However, it's not as specific use. For instance, while I've done excellent Q1 when they have indoor basketball courts, indoor racquetball courts, you're not going to see that in Q2. Okay, then you have good quality, which would be in like a subdivision. So if you have a Q3 home, it means you're in a subdivision, you're basically good quality, everything is decent quality. Q2 would be a little bit more specific, where it's maybe you go into a different neighborhood where it's got some more higher end finishes, and Q1 is basically, this is my home, I made whatever I wanted, I put the basketball court, the huge pool and all this stuff, your Q1 is gonna go up. It'll be more of a Q1. Q6 is basically poor, very poor. Then condition, this is where we start looking at condition ratings. C1 is brand new construction condition, never lived in, everything's good. C2, there's no deferred maintenance. No deferred maintenance needed. It's been updated, kitchen's been updated if need be, all the appliances, all the major stuff has been updated. C3, limited deferred maintenance. Everything functions as it should. There's been a couple updates, but not everything. And there is no really deferred maintenance at all. It's just there's a few things that probably need to be done, but not necessary. C4, minor deferred maintenance. Just a few minor things that need to be done, but it's okay because the quality of it or condition of it is still acceptable and livable. C5, significant deferred maintenance. You got issues. It might impact our appraisal. You've got some issues here. Lots of stuff that needs to be done. C6, severe damage, holes in the roof, lots of other problems and issues. So when we're looking at these are the condition ratings that are on there, and each one of those comes with a valuation. The valuation, so for a C, it's all dependent on neighborhood. So for a C3 to a C4 on a $200,000 home was a difference of like $20,000 in one instance. So he was saying from your C3, your C4, your condition to a C3 where no real deferred maintenance, things have been updated and good, and your C4 that has some deferred maintenance and needs it, he said that's a $20,000 value difference. Your home is better by 20 grand. They don't go in and say, how much did you pay for the roof? How much was the floors? Let me give you money for the floors. Let me give you money for, they say, overall, your condition has limited deferred maintenance. You've done enough nice updates. They're at a good quality. And the number I'm giving for the overall updates that you've done compared to the comparables that are out there is X. I'm associating a number to the overall property, not the individual things that you've done. Which is why when I'm looking at properties, I'm looking at flooring. I'm not saying they've got new flooring, and look, if the flooring's been updated, if it's ugly, it's still been updated. If a kitchen has been renovated, the kitchen's been renovated. Just because yours is nicer doesn't mean you get more money for it. You have a newer kitchen, so do they. Theirs is just ugly. You're gonna get the same amount of money for it because that's personal opinion. So a lot of us get stuck on, yeah, but those are tile floors and I've got LVP or I've got LVP and those are tile. If it costs the same and it's the same quality and condition, you're not getting more money for it just because it's more desirable to you. There is no box on an appraiser for the wow factor. What that does is it influences the appraiser to maybe give you more, but he can't check a box and give you more just because yours is nicer. There is no mine's nicer than yours is box or no wow factor box. We have to make sure we're considering that when we're doing things. Yes, but mine's nicer. I understand yours is nicer, which means a buyer will probably pay more for them. The buyer will probably pay more. I have to be able to justify it to the appraiser, which means I need a list of everything that you've done. When I go meet an appraiser, my appraisal package is comps, features and benefits of the home, the community, proximity to things. Every feature and benefit it has, I don't care how obvious it is, I'm going to list it, because if I give you a list this long of everything, even if it's obvious, it looks a heck of a lot better that we have all of these things, and it's just influential that, wow, this guy put some time and effort into it, and so did the seller. Look at all the things they've done. So we're just trying to influence, and we influence people by doing a really good job and being very diligent, and they see that we took time and effort and put it into it. What other things are on there? Room count. If you have an extra room, they'll determine what an extra room is worth there. They may give you $4 grand, $6 grand. I'm talking an extra room like you have a living room and a formal dining room. Or you have an office, the other one doesn't have an office. They'll give you value for that, depending on where they see the value. Square foot adjustments. Like I was just talking about, they don't do price per square foot. They determine in that neighborhood how much the square foot is different and what the buyer paid for that price per that home, the difference in square footage. And then they say, that's the value I give for the square footage difference. And it's typically right now, I'm seeing most of the time, it's around $75 to $100 a square foot in the majority of our just normal areas. So if you have a home that's 200 square foot larger, 150 square foot larger, I would say you're going to be around $100 a square foot is what the allocation I'm seeing is. So if you're 150 square foot and you're $100 a square foot, that's $15,000 more for the square footage because you're bigger by 150 square foot. So there's just some numbers that we have to use while we do our pricing. What you don't see, mine is better than yours box, no wow factor box. What else? Solar panels. There's no box for solar panels. He has to find a way to work them in. We had two appraisers stand up on this stage one day, did an appraisal class. They were literally talking back and forth. They did things completely different. What do you get for solar panels? I saw a national stat that said homes sold with solar panels sold on average 4% higher than homes without. So I use that 4% number and I find a way to justify it with their invoicing and everything that they have for what they paid. But I typically won't go over that 4%. On a $500,000 home, that's max 20 grand, but you're putting 50 to 70 grand in solar panels. You're not getting it back. What's a solar panel sales pitch? Oh, it's going to appraise for more. You'll get all that value back. You don't. Because the second appraiser that was standing up here, what do you do for solar panels? Nothing. I don't add value for solar panels. I won't do it. Why? I don't see the justification. They can easily be removed. If they stop paying for them, if they're leased, if they decide they don't want them anymore, they can take them off. I can't give them that value. So those are two different opinions from appraisers who are professionals. There is no standard in the appraiser's conduct that shows what they have to do for solar panels. Desirability, the buyer really wants it. There is no box for buyer desirability. There is no box for mine's way nicer. The buyers are going to want mine over, which is why mine sold for 80 grand more than yours, because mine just looks nicer and shows nicer because I have nicer furniture, I put nicer curtains, and I keep mine clean, and the other one isn't. There is no desirability box. So it doesn't matter how much nicer it is, you need to be able to justify it with the condition and quality. You need to be able to show those things. Yeah, okay, well, but I replaced all the floors. Okay, so did they. But mine are nicer. That's your opinion. You both replaced all the floors. You both replaced your kitchen. You both painted the whole house. They picked a crappy color. Yours is nicer. You picked better furniture. Guess where the furniture goes when you close? Out the door. The buyer found yours more desirable, but it's not going to always get that much more value. Smell, sight, and feel. We try to influence the appraiser using these, but there is no box for him to check or value to add for it. The sight of it, why we stage the home, influences the appraiser because it looks nicer, feels nicer, and he can attribute more value to it because it's cared for. I have a package. I showed him everything we did. He can see all the value. Feel. If he feels good walking through there, he's going to be in a better mood, and he might give us a more quality response rather than a lesser quality response. Smell. If it smells like cat piss, he's going to be pissed. He's not going to want to be in there any longer. He's not going to be focusing on that and not what he's trying to do, which is get the value. And there is no delineational difference typically in our average homes between tile, carpet, LVP, or black versus stainless appliances. or $500 fans versus $150 fans. He has to be able to take the overall look of the house and attribute a Q rating to it, a construction quality rating to it. And if you put in all of this crazy stuff, gold toilets, $5,000 fans, marble floors imported from Italy, in a simple neighborhood where everything else is builder grade, you're not going to get all of that back because you are the outlier. He'll give you as much as he can, but he's not going to be able to give you all of that back. He's going to look at all of those. They have new carpet. You have new laminate. Yeah, maybe there's a little difference. I mean, my Q rating, it might make a difference, but everything else is the same. That's the only difference. I can't give you anything else for that. Your Q rating is the same. The quality of everything you did is the same, and the condition of everything you did is the same as that one. Just because that one has carpet, you have tile, I can't give you that difference. That can happen. It's the overall rating of the house, which is why sight, sound, feel, smell, all of those are a big factor that we need to justify to this appraiser. All right, cool. That's all the time we have for today. I hope I was able to give you a little bit of valuable information with appraisers. I've got these slides if you want. So if you want, just kind of send me a message and ask me to share those with you. I'm going to do some updating on them because I've done this presentation before. Some of the numbers are a little different, but they're still within that ballpark. And again, these are not end-all be-all numbers. Every area and neighborhood is going to be a little bit different. They're all going to be a little bit different. What I've tried to do is get the generality of what it is. Appraising and pricing is an art. It's not a science. I can't just go and put this number and say, that's the number. It's an art. You have to dig in. You really have to start seeing and feeling. Appraising and pricing is a story. Your job is to create a story as to why the home is priced like this, higher, lower, more than anything else that was there. That's your job, to tell that story, to tell the story to the seller so we get the right price, to tell the story to the buyer so they buy at the highest value, and to tell the story to the appraiser so we get that value added out of it. So that's our pricing strategies and talk today. If you want the slides, you'll have to email me because I don't have everybody's information on this. I can't remember all of them, so just send me an email and I can share it out to you with some of this info in it. So happy Wednesday. Have a wonderful day today.